All right, good morning. The internet in this building's been awful today, but I finally got it working, so I can record today's session, which is good. It didn't work in the previous class, but it's working now, so I'll take it. I wanted to remind you, so we won't have class on Wednesday, like I mentioned before, so I'm gonna put this up here. So we'll have a no in-person class.
It's gonna be sick, right?
Yes, it's coming on. I mean, I think I actually jinxed myself because I said I was gonna be violently sick this week and my throat is so tight. Like, it doesn't hurt, but it's tight. I was like, why did I have to jinx it? Like, I didn't really mean sick. I'm hoping it's just because I did a lot of screaming on Saturday at the soccer game. I'm hoping that's it. And the football game last night, like, but you know. So no in-person class on Wednesday. But I am gonna give you one thing to do because it was gonna be on that day. I have two videos. And so we were going to either do this in person or it was gonna be a virtual guest speaker. And I'll show you where they'll be posted. But the library and the writing center, I've been working with them and we've made two videos to help all of you with the paper. The second part of the paper and then the third part of the paper. So what I'd like to ask you to do, you don't need to do it on Wednesday, but sometime before I see you the following week, I'd like you to watch the two videos on Canvas. So you don't need to do anything with it. There's no like assignment or anything, but they will be really helpful resources. So one of them is on APA formatting. And the other is on library resources. So you don't need to do that on Wednesday, but just at some point this week, if you could take, it'll take you probably about an hour in total to do. So you could take the time that you have on Wednesday to do that, or you can just take the time to relax and do it at another time. But if you're on Canvas, let's go there together for a moment. I have to make them visible, which I will do. But all the way down, if you click on modules and go down here, so here's all of our PowerPoint slides. And then virtual guest speakers. So I have the library resources and APA video presentations. Here we go. So now you can see it. So if you click on that, what will come up is there's a video here on library resources. So the librarian goes over academic versus non-academic sources, how to find articles online using our library system. You don't even have to go to the library. You can do it all online if you would like to. She also made a little 7-minute follow-up about a couple of like last minute updates. And then there is a presentation by the Writing Center, a student who works there who's phenomenal. Jasmine, she's amazing. And she went over some basics for APA formatting. So I've put these on here for you under the modules link. And again, they're right here where it says virtual guest speakers, library, APA video presentations. So it's visible for you at some point this week. Please take the time to watch them. If you don't watch them now, you'll probably want to watch them later, but they're going to be helpful for that second part of the paper where you have to choose a source. And then you're going to have to start thinking about APA formatting for the final paper. And they worked with me. We made these recordings and I think they're pretty helpful. So I posted them and they'll be there for the rest of the semester should you want them. Yeah.
There's also Google Docs that already have the APA format already.
Yeah. That's fantastic, right? There's so many wonderful online resources for APA formatting. And that's what Jasmine goes over in her APA presentation is you don't need to memorize this stuff. You just need to know where to go to get help. And if you scroll up here, I actually have some other stuff as well. So I have the handout that the Writing Center created for our class. And then I have their PowerPoint slides as well, and then a link to resources. So I've put a bunch of stuff on there to help you. And we'll talk about that second part of the paper maybe next week. But if you have a chance, please take the time to watch those videos. And then remember that they're just there for you should you need them later in the semester. Where they go? There. If you would like to go back and reference them. So are the handouts and the PowerPoints and everything as well. So we won't have class on Wednesday, but I'm going to give you that assignment. Again, you don't have to do it that day. You don't have to turn anything in. And I will think of all of you as I'm eating massive amounts of churros. I will think of you, right? I'll take a bite for each of you. How generous of me, right? That's a lot of bites. I can handle it, right? I've been stretching. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so that will be there for you. I just made it visible, so you should be able to see it. And then I also have a cool mindfulness training. I can make that visible too. You don't need to do anything with it, but if you wanted to know more about mindfulness, which we'll talk about for a moment today, I put that on there as well. Any questions about that? Questions about Wednesday? We'll meet on Monday like normal. We'll move on to our next chapter. The slides will be up and everything, but okay. So we're going to go back to this. We have a few things left, and I gave you a homework assignment. So what I'd like you to do, I want to give you just a couple of minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, find a few people around you, see if you came up with the same answer. And if you didn't, you can talk a little bit about why. And then I will collect those from you and we'll talk about it in one. But I'll give you a couple of minutes, talk about it with your neighbors, and we'll talk about it together. Oops. Yeah, so normally you need to send it to me. You can send it to me later.
Yeah, we'll do it today.
Yeah, just send me a
And it's earlier, so good check.
No,
Good
fine.
check.
So just pick up the truck.
Okay, so where can I find it? It's in the,
Oh, yeah, I don't have a copy of the sign on it. Did you have the
okay,
actual sign? So you could take a picture of what you did.
okay, no, but the assignment itself is campus.
So I handed them out last class.
Oh,
So
because I will take.
you can always see somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm. For the. Yeah. I think that. Bro.
All right, let's talk these folks real quick together and then I'll collect this from you. But again, these are all real news stories, which I think for some reason to me that makes them all the more interesting. The fact that these are all true stories. But let's go through these and then I'll collect it and I look forward to reading the stories and creating too. I love that. So how about Brian? Anyone want to share your thoughts on what's going on with Brian? Yeah, thank you. Okay, and why? Why did you think that?
Because he witnessed a terrible trauma, experienced physical problems that didn't seem to have underlying neurological pathologies.
Yeah, right. He had something really traumatic happen to him and he converted that emotional trauma to physical symptoms. There's nothing physically wrong with him. I think that fits really, really well. Yeah.
That's the second break, but if you would have said, loss of sensation is right there, making them pop up in the walk, so it's effectively voluntary.
Yeah, was really common with converting disorder. So it can be a loss of a sense of vision or hearing, or it can be like a loss of sensation and movement. And like for him, it was a leg, right? Something close their hand or whatnot. But yeah, it's dramatic, right? And once he starts to deal with that trauma, then that feeling should come back. Again, it's just so wild that we can do that without meaning to. How about Blanca? Anyone willing to share their thoughts on Blanca? Yeah.
Because she's trying to get like by making her children.
Yeah, that's so sad, right? Like, and unfortunately, stuff like this happens, which is why, like we talked about before, social workers need to check on children whenever they're in the hospital for any reason. But yeah, just making somebody else sick. So it's that by proxy element. You could have also said factitious disorder. Remember, that is just the technical name, but Munchausen by proxy, I think fits the best. That's perfect. How about Tom, our Chicago lawyer? Yeah, thank you. Sure, and why?
Pretty much he went to 3 different doctors or more. And whatever diagnosis he was given, he didn't agree. He said they were wrong. And that he wasn't anymore.
Yeah, right. The going from doctor to doctor to doctor, thinking it's something more serious. And then you add the fact that his dad passed away from prostate cancer. You can see why he might have developed this, right? That's not uncommon with this disorder, that somebody in your life had a massive illness or something fatal like cancer here. And so you might be looking for it at every turn. It would not be, just as a side note, sometimes people think it's this one, or the somatization pattern, but he doesn't have a sexual symptom or a neurological symptom. Remember, you have to have those 4 different symptoms to have that. So I would definitely say illness, anxiety, disorder fits in best. Last one, Leslie, AKA Kim. This could be Kim, right? But any thoughts on Leslie? Anyone want to share what you thought for Leslie? Question? Kim did this, by the way. He threw her a baby shower and everything. And then it was just one baby, but then the babies never came, just magically went away. Like, oh yeah, I lost the baby. It was a massive baby shower. The whole family was there. And she was never pregnant. Anyone, I've given you lots of hints here, but anyone, yeah. Yeah.
Like is she really pregnant?
Yes. Oh my God. And I remember the whole time she was pregnant, I was like, there's no way. I was like, I'm not gonna see the baby. Even if the baby was born, like that's not even. Like I was like, I don't want this. because she had lied so many times, it's hard to, people lie to them, which is hard to believe. But yeah, when she actually had her daughter, I did not believe it at all, right? Anyone thoughts on Leslie? What do you think? Yeah, thank you.
Well, for fictitious disorder,
Sure.
I just put no biological basis and intentional users, but other versus
Actual health data.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, so factitious or fictitious disorder or Munchausen, either one would work. Remember, they're interchangeable. One is the like technical diagnostic name and one's the popular name. We were talking about over here, right, Munchausen by proxy, but since the babies were fictitious or made up, I think Munchausen's would fit a little bit better. But yeah, all of these are real stories. And so I think a nice opportunity to practice, identifying these. And then I look forward to your scenario that you came up with. I will read those later and enjoy that. So if you want to go ahead and pass those up to me, I will take them from you. Okay. So remind me, forgive me, I didn't write it down. Did we talk about this slide yet? No, right? We ended here, but we didn't talk about this one yet, right? Okay. Thank you. My other class, we got through this one. I couldn't remember. Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about this one last time, the illness, anxiety. Yeah. And then, so we talked about the different disorders, some causes and treatments. Okay. So almost all of these disorders are related to stress or trauma or anxiety in some way. There's also a lot of behavioral and cognitive explanations for them. So stress and trauma, right? Like, so conversion disorder, very directly connected to trauma. People experience a trauma and then they convert that trauma into a physical symptom. The other ones are very anxiety and stress driven, right? So people have anxiety about their health, hence the illness anxiety disorder, or they have a bunch of different physical things going on as a result of stress or anxiety or trauma. But we can also look at those behavioral and cognitive explanations, right? If you from a very young age received attention when you were sick or when you acted out or when something bad happened, that can very easily become a pattern for you, right? And so it's a matter of trying to figure out when that pattern started. How can we teach you a better way to get attention? My daughter Paisley, oh my gosh, my daughter is such a hypochondriac, right? Like illness, anxiety disorder to a T. And we're constantly are telling her, Paisley, if you need attention, just ask, right? If you want a hug, just ask. You don't have to be sick. Every day, it's like my stomach hurts. And like your stomach hurts every day. Like we like minimize it. And I feel like a bad parent sometimes for minimizing it. But if I reward that behavior too much, then she learns that that's the only way to get attention, right? So we tell her constantly, hey, if you need some attention, just come ask for a hug. I love hugs. I'll hug you all day, right? But don't try and get it. You're seeing your stomach hurts, right? And so this is something that can get rewarded from a very young age. I often wonder with Kim, like when it started, right? Like I always want to ask my mother-in-law, like when did it begin, right? But we don't talk about Kim, right, in our family. So I don't ask, but I've always wondered because there's got to be a root to it. And oftentimes these behavioral explanations really start these off. People learn to be rewarded or reinforced for playing a sick role, and then it just escalates over time. So a lot of stress, trauma, anxiety, and then some behavioral and cognitive stuff. In terms of treatments, people don't tend to seek therapy for these things, right? They go to doctors, right? So if you woke up blind, you would go to a doctor. If you were having a bunch of vague physical complaints, you would probably go to a doctor. If you thought you were super sick with something serious, you would go to a doctor. So oftentimes therapy kind of becomes a last resort once we've eliminated like actual physical causes. Only then do we start to look at psychological treatments. And it might be the case that we consider some like therapy or antidepressant drugs or exposure and response prevention. But usually the key to these is finding the root of the disorder, and then re-educating and finding a better way to get that attention or get those needs met, right? So whatever the root might be, trying to identify it and work through it through therapy. Sometimes medication, if people are having a lot of anxiety or it has roots in depression, but those don't tend to be the first line of treatment. Again, most of the time people go to a doctor, and not until something shows up in an atypical way do we start to look at, a psychological explanation. There are a couple of very, very common physical stress disorders. And I'm sorry, the names in this chapter are so confusing. I don't know why they have like somatoform disorders, somatization, psychosomatic, psychophysiological, like there's a lot of overlap. But psychosomatic or psychophysiological literally means mind-body disorders. So these are things that are incredibly common. If I were to ask you, I imagine a lot of you have struggled with one of these things at some point in your life, right? These are illnesses or disorders that result from an interaction of psychological and physical or organic factors. So there is something physically going on, but it's oftentimes made worse or brought on by psychological factors. So if any of you get headaches, like migraine headaches or muscle contraction headaches or like TMJ related like headaches, those are often considered psychosomatic disorders. When you're stressed, you tend to clench your muscles tighter. Sometimes people clench their jaws or grind their teeth at night, and that can lead to headaches the next day or even that evening. And those are very directly connected to stress. Insomnia, where people can't fall asleep or stay asleep, is very directly connected to stress. Most people who struggle to sleep, but it's because they have bad sleep habits or sleep hygiene or a lot of stress in their lives, and that can make it difficult to fall asleep. Asthma, ulcers, high blood pressure, these are all things that are directly impacted by stress and anxiety and tension in your life. Even heart disease, like being more prone to get high blood pressure or heart attacks as you age. All of these are connected to stress. So the key with these is there's actually something physically going on, but there's a part of it that's being exacerbated by stress. Very, very, very common kind of stuff. Migraines especially often are triggered by being under extreme stress. Some factors that contribute to why you might get these or might not. There was a famous study done back in like the 70s, and it's very flawed, but we do have a couple of takeaways from it. This was funded by tobacco companies, and so we've kind of dismissed it largely. But what we were looking at, what is the role of stress and personality on illness? And what we noticed is a kind of a general trend, people who tend to be more like hard-driven, hostile, competitive, ambitious, type A's, right? I'm going to conquer the mountain as fast as I can because it's there, tend to struggle more with like psychophysiological illnesses. They tend to be a little more vulnerable to them than people who are more like laid back and relaxed. Like, oh, I'm going to sit against the mountain. It's not going anywhere, right? Now, this is super oversimplified. Very few people are exclusively type A or B. A lot of us are mixed. And there's a type C and D and E and F, and it goes on and on and on. But the takeaway from this is there are some psychological factors that play a role in how we respond to stress and how vulnerable we might be to getting sick or having some of those illnesses when we're stressed out. Again, everybody has their own threshold, their amount of resiliency, and some people tend to be more prone based on their personality style and the way they react to stuff. So not a perfect idea, but a couple of takeaways that we can still have from it. And one other thing that we've noticed a lot is that people tend to get sick quite a lot when they're stressed out. Finals week. Now, we're not taking finals in person, but if we were, like, it's like everybody is sick during finals week. You hear the sniffles and the coughs, like constantly. There's a very strong connection between high levels of stress and illness. And so oftentimes when people are really stressed out, they get sick or shortly after the stress has passed. And a big reason for that is when you are stressed out, stress impairs the health of your immune system. It disrupts the way that it functions. all of that energy that could go to fighting off like foreign bacteria or viruses or whatever is being used to combat stress. And so people tend to get sick when they're stressed out. Cancer progresses at a faster rate. Diseases can progress at a faster rate. Things that lie dormant in your system can pop up under stress, like shingles, for example, is a very commonly referenced one. But this whole branch called psychoneuroimmunology looks at the relationship between stress and the immune system and illness. Very well documented that when we are stressed out, like for a long period of time or high levels of stress, that we are more vulnerable to getting sick. So stress doesn't cause like cancer and things like that, but it can accelerate the rate at which they progress. So it's very common to tackle stress as part of like a cancer treatment or like a health related treatment as well. I think I have one more slide, but any like questions or thoughts or comments or anything before I keep going? Yeah. Yeah, and remember they're all online as well, like if you need them. Yeah.
Sitting here this whole semester, sort of prosecuting style, but I'd like to propose that put a 8 to 10 word word in your notes. That you each get a point or two extra credit on the next.
If you spell it correctly.
Yeah, no, you just put them away, take notes on, write down a 10-letter word, and maybe you bump it up.
Fair enough, right? If you have to spell something out, right?
So 5 of them. A total of 5 of them, then maybe you'll pick it off.
Right.
Throw that out.
Most of you are doing fantastically. I'm not sure very many of you need the extra points, but as a side note, so psychoneuroimmunology, longest word up here, very commonly abbreviated PNI. So you can have it be much, much shorter for you with that, but I like it. Spelling has never been my strong suit. Spelling and math, I'm learning that I have like my kids have completely passed me in mathematical ability and they're in like 3rd and 5th grade. Right? 5th grade math is hard, you guys. Like, I don't know. I need a tutor. My daughter's like, can you help me prime factor this? I'm like, no, no, I can't. I'm so sorry. I don't even know what that means. Right? Yeah. Psychology doesn't require a lot of math. That's one really nice plus about this field. Statistics, but not math. Any other comments or thoughts? Yeah.
It's kind of like off topic a little bit, you mentioned shingles and stress.
Yeah.
And when I was really little, my sister got so stressed out in college, she got a 3rd case of shingles,
Mhm.
and it paralyzed her from, I think it was like this side of her body.
Wow.
Was paralyzed, and then her hips down. She's fine now. Don't know
It went away. Okay.
Yeah. But that was really little. Reminded me of that. It's crazy how stress.
Yeah.
And that everybody experiences on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
Actually, so much.
Yeah.
You know, it's just.
I'm glad you shared that, and I'm glad everything came back for her. How scary. Yeah. And like, that's one of those examples of like, I think most of us tend to think of stress as like, oh yeah, I'm stressed. Not a big deal. Like it just is, right? And a lot of us handle our stress well, but really high levels of stress can cause us a lot of problems, whether it is our heart, like our head, like these illnesses and disorders that we're talking about. Stress plays a really big role in a lot of things. And there's more and more research to support that. And so it's important to learn ways to deal with our stress, even though most of us tend to kind of dismiss it. It's still important. Last note here in this chapter. So we talked a little bit about like stress in the last chapter as well, but there is a whole branch called behavioral medicine that combines a bunch of different like psychological and physical interventions together to treat medical issues related to stress. And so there's a bunch of things up here like relaxation training and meditation, very common to promote things like this, right? Taking a few deep breaths, even just a couple of deep, like clearing breaths can be enough to calm you down. If you calm your body, it will calm your mind. If you calm your mind, it will calm your body. So it's relatively common even just to encourage a few deep breaths. I don't know if any of you like have this on your phone or like on your smartwatch if you have one, but I have the like mindfulness breathing app online. And my kids think it's so much fun because what it does is it's like 10 deep breaths and it tracks your heart rate from beginning to end. My kids think it's hilarious to try and mess up my heart rate during this. So they're like, let's do the breathing. And I'm like trying to breathe and calm down. And then they try and stress me out to see if they can make my heart rate go up. Totally counterintuitive. But there's a bunch of different like free apps that do this. I forget the name of it. It's on my watch, right? It's this tiny little thing up at the top. I'm like, I want to find it real quick. It's like a meditation. Oh, there it is. It is just called mindfulness breathing, right? And it's a breathing mindfulness app. Causes you to take just 10 deep breaths and then it measures your heart rate. My kids like think it's the funniest thing ever. There's also things like the Calm app and Headspace. I don't know if any of you've used Calm before, but it's a really neat like app. It has some free features and then some that you have to purchase. But it has like soundscapes and relaxation activities, sleep stories. And it's got a lot of like cool things related to that. Same with Headspace. So this one is a little more like cognitive behavioral in nature. But there's a bunch of like free breathing apps and relaxation apps that are available to use. Things like biofeedback is another one that you can do where they connect little sensors all over your body and they measure where you're holding your stress. So oftentimes we don't realize that we clench parts of our body or that there maybe are tight. Right? Like I constantly throughout the day have to remind myself not to clench my jaw because I have a tendency to do that. Right. And so biofeedback measures that. And then you work on trying to calm those areas down and release that tension. Hypnosis, sometimes used to plant like suggestions to relax and calm down. Insight therapy and support groups. Mindfulness training. I mentioned this earlier. Mindfulness is something that has gained so much popularity in the last like 10 years. And I have that really kind of neat mindfulness training our health center put together on our website. I just showed you if you want to check that out. They have a bunch of little activities, but it's all about being present and deep breathing and trying to be calm. Aromatherapy is another thing a lot of people use. One other side note, as part of like therapy, a very growing trend is to have clients who've experienced stress or trauma come up with a calm place or a safe place to think of. Right. And so you think of somewhere that is like calming or peaceful to you. And then you picture that in moments of stress. So you close your eyes and you picture that like calm beach or forest or whatever it might be. And then it's supposed to help you calm down through like a type of conditioning. So these are things that are used quite a bit as a way to help people relax. I don't know if anyone in here does things like yoga or like guided relaxation exercises. But that's very much along these lines. And there's so many of them for free online. I have one that's my absolute favorite. It's this like guided walk through a forest. So you have to picture like walking through a forest. And it's about 9 minutes long. I mean, I have it. Does anyone want to do it? I heard one yes. That's all I needed. All right. I'm easy. All right. One yes, and we're good. So I'll play this for you. I can leave that on. So what all it is, there's nothing to look at. It's just a black screen. But what it has is like a person telling you to like picture this forest and you're just going to close your eyes and do your best with that. So try and get as comfortable as you can. I know this isn't the most like comfortable, safe environment for everybody, but try and get comfortable. And it's about 9.5 minutes long. So notice how you feel now. We'll see how you feel after. Try not to fall asleep, ideally, but hopefully you do feel a little more relaxed. So again, all you're going to be doing is closing your eyes and kind of listening to her suggestions and breathing, right? And hopefully it'll make you feel a little more calm. There we go.
Guided imagery is a powerful relaxation technique. In this exercise, you will be guided into a beautiful, tranquil forest. As your imagination is guided through various sensory suggestions, your body and mind will respond as though what you are imagining is real. So if you are feeling tense or stressed, this will help shift your mood to one of peace and relaxation. So begin by finding a comfortable place to relax and make sure you're warm. placing yourself into a nice, comfortable position, either sitting or lying down on a bed, couch, or the floor. And when you're ready, close your eyes. Begin by taking a nice slow deep breath, deep into the belly. Hold the breath for a brief moment and release the breath. Once again, nice deep breath in, hold, and now release. As you release the breath, let go of any tension, surrendering the weight of your body onto the surface that you're lying on. One last time, deep breath in, hold, and now exhale. Feel yourself beginning to relax and let go. Now imagine you're walking along a path in a beautiful secluded forest on a bright, sunny autumn morning. The path is soft underneath your shoes. You can hear each of your footsteps against the forest floor, where there are fallen leaves, pine needles, twigs, and moss. As you walk along the path, you can feel a gentle, cool breeze caressing your cheeks. You hear the birds singing and the leaves of the trees as they rustle in the wind. As you continue to walk, you feel relaxed and your mind clears more and more with each step you take. The fresh air is revitalizing as you take a nice deep breath in and as you continue to walk through the forest. You notice the tall trees around you. The red and golden leaves look magnificent, and you stop for a moment to take in this beautiful scenery around you. You notice a red leaf falling from a tree as it dances and twirls in the air before slowly fluttering down to rest along with the others. In the distance, you hear the babbling of a stream. As you look ahead, you notice the sun dappling through the trees, and you see the sun reflection upon the gurgling stream that runs along the edge of the forest. You continue to tread carefully into the forest, over the crackling red and golden leaves, and the broken twigs and pine cones that are scattered across the ground. It is very peaceful here, and the deeper you venture into the forest, the deeper into relaxation you fall, and you're filled with a deep sense of peace and tranquility. You pause a while and rest against an old oak tree. And you feel the rough bark of the tree against your fingers. You look down and you notice a patch of soft green moss that covers a smooth, large rock, and its lushness invites you to sit down for a while. The tree welcomes you to lean against its bark so that you feel comfortable. While sitting quietly beneath this oak tree, you enjoy the peace and stillness. You feel nourished by the warmth of the sun on your body, and you feel a deep connection to all that is around you. You feel the warmth of the sun soothing and relaxing your head, your back, your shoulders, arms, and legs. Your whole body is peaceful and relaxed. Take a few moments and enjoy this deep sense of peace and relaxation. Now bring your awareness back to where you're sitting beneath the oak tree and see yourself slowly standing up. You brush off any leaves or moss that may be on your clothes. You take a final look at the beautiful scenery around you. And when you're ready, follow the trail back as you proceed to leave the forest. Now bring your awareness back to the room. Become aware of the surface beneath you. Notice the sounds in the room. Feel yourself awaken. And when you're ready, open your eyes, feeling refreshed, alert, relaxed.
All right. Hopefully I didn't lose anybody falling asleep, right? Right, sleepy now. So the nice thing about those is so that one was about 9.5 minutes, right? And it's funny, I saw this poster once. It said that the time to relax is when you don't have time for it, right? And it's true, right? But that makes it, of course, harder. But the nice thing about those is, I don't know about you, like at the beginning, like I can feel all the tension, and as it goes through, I can kind of feel some of that let go. And it's totally common if you don't do a lot of these to be distracted, right? Like at one point I was like, oh, don't forget to set my lineups for tonight. Like Cooper Cup is playing tonight. No, stop, right? And I have to remind myself to come back. And so if you have those moments, that's okay. The more you do these, the better you get at them. But there's just an absolute ton of these. That one's just, I found it free on YouTube. As a side note, if any of you have one that you do all the time that you love, send it to me. I would love a new one. I do these. I try and do these a lot because I think they're really good for you to lower your stress. And my kids have gotten good at doing them, which is kind of cute too. They all have their own calm places that they picture when they can't fall asleep. You know, side effects of having a, therapist, teacher, psychology person as a parent, right? They all have calm places that they imagine at night. But I think doing these little things all the time can be really helpful. And so these are some of the things that we might do to help minimize stress and minimize some of those disorders that we talked about. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I mean, really, before bed is the best time to do these because a lot of people struggle to fall asleep at night, right? And so doing these things, that's why I think I love like Bloom, the app. It has all these what they call sleep stories. And so it's somebody telling like a random, like they're not overly like plot driven like stories in a very soothing way. And oftentimes like they're meant to put you to sleep, right? They help you relax and go to sleep. So very commonly done before bed. It can be really helpful for falling asleep. Yeah.
I think the best times are the ones that have like some kind of like crazy ambient, like new age background music.
Right.
When I was a kid, I had this one, I think it was my dad's, and it had all that crazy ambient music. But the best part was that the narrator was this Australian dude.
Yeah.
And he would just be like, just want you to feel that relaxation spreading from the crown of your head all the way down to the scalp.
You're like, it's working. I'm there. Yeah.
Once
Right. It helps so much when they have a really cool accent or like a really nice voice. That makes a big difference. Sometimes they're grating and that makes it hard to relax. But like for me, like I love the forest, right? So I mean, my screensaver, right? Like it's a forest, right? So so for me, that one of like picturing a walk through the forest on a fall day, I'm like, sold, let's do this, right? If you like the beach, then maybe a beach one is the best for you. Like 2 of my kids are a forest and 1 of my kids is a beach for their calm places. Like, so I think it's just finding something that works for you. When they have a cool accent, I think that only adds to it, right? I like that too. And again, if you have a fun one that you do, send it to me. I'll definitely give it a shot, at least once. All right. Any other thoughts or anything there before we move on to chapter 6? Okay. So our next group of disorders that we'll talk about are the mood disorders. So we talked about anxiety earlier in the semester, and anxiety disorders, if you remember, were the most common. A lot of people struggle with anxiety. Mood disorders are number 2. A lot of people struggle with mood disorders. In these last couple of years, we've seen a lot of depression rates really being on the rise, as people have gone through tough times and isolation and so on. But we'll talk a little bit about the extremes of mood. And there's kind of 2 ends of the spectrum of mood. And then when you put them together, what can happen, and then some treatments and causes and so on. So when we talk about mood, we can think about mood as having 2 like opposite ends, 2 poles, if you will. So the 2 poles are ends of mood. If we have the low end, the extreme low would be represented by depression. And the extreme high end of mood would be mania. And then most of us spend our time in here, right? Kind of in the middle, like normal, we could say typical mood. You have a really good day, maybe on the higher end, bad day on the lower end, and a lot of time in like the neutral, typical middle. Now with mood disorders, people have emotional extremes. So you have somebody who is experiencing very severe lows, right? Which we would call depression, or very severe highs, which we could call mania, or maybe they're alternating back and forth between the two. There are cases where people have both. Now, so if somebody has depression and mania, we call that bipolar disorder. It used to be called manic depression, which makes sense, right? Mania and depression, manic depression. But they changed the name because there's actually two different types, which we'll talk about next week. There's a bipolar 1 and a bipolar 2, depending on how much mania or something called hypomania that you might have. So it's no longer called manic depression. It's called bipolar disorder when you have both poles or both ends of the spectrum of mood. So we'll talk more about these, but depression is the low, sad state, and mania is kind of the up, euphoric, frenzied, agitated state. And people can have one or the other or both. So again, we all have changes in mood. We're all going to have good moods and bad moods and up days and down days. But people who have depression or bipolar or mania have these for longer periods of time, or maybe they're more intense or severe than is typical or expected. So that's what we'll talk about throughout this unit, starting with depression, which I think people are much more familiar with than mania. But again, two ends of the spectrum of mood. So if we start with depression, in order to have what's called unipolar or major depression, you have depression without a history of mania. So unipolar means one pole, so just one end of the spectrum. So somebody who has major depression is struggling with depression only. I don't mean like it's not a lot as much as just no mania, right? So only dealing with the low end and depression. And in order to be diagnosed with unipolar or major depression, you have to have what's called a major depressive episode. So we talk about episodes of mood. You can have a manic episode, a depressive episode, and there's a bunch of different symptoms that go with that. But to have a major depressive episode, you have to have 5 or more symptoms lasting for at least 2 weeks. Now, for some people, this can last quite a bit longer. This might be months that people are struggling with a depressive episode, but it has to last at least 2 weeks and cause that significant distress and impairment. It's affecting your life in some way. And there are a whole host of symptoms. So let's write some of them up here. People can have, one of them is weight loss or weight gain. Sometimes when people are depressed, they eat and eat and eat. It's like they're trying to fill a hole. They're trying to find some kind of pleasure or happiness, and they end up gaining weight. Or people might have so little interest in eating and not get any pleasure out of food that they end up not eating and they lose weight. So it can go either way. Either one is diagnostic. So either weight loss or weight gain, right? Depending on the direction that somebody goes in. They have a diminished interest in pleasurable activities. The things that used to bring you pleasure and enjoyment just don't anymore, right? So you used to always love hanging out with your friends, and now you just don't have the motivation or desire to do that. You've always loved playing your guitar, and you just can't get motivated to do it. It doesn't bring you any happiness anymore. Right, so this is a very common symptom. People just don't enjoy the things that they used to. They can't find the motivation or the joy in it, and so they stop doing them. And oftentimes it becomes very cyclical. The more they stop doing that, the less joy they're feeling, and the depression can sometimes get worse. Yeah.
So, like a series of questions like that the doctor would ask them to see if possibly they would have like bipolar disorder or like depression.
Sure. I mean, typically it's just, you know, when you go into a doctor or psychologist and they're looking at the symptoms, you know, they might ask you, are you, you know, have you had any weight loss or gain? Have you Are you struggling to enjoy the things that you've always enjoyed? Like, there is something called the Beck Depression Inventory, the BDI, a shortened name. But that's typically given to people who've already been diagnosed as an indicator of how severe the depression is. So very commonly used by cognitive psychologists. When you go to therapy, they'll give it to you. It takes just a couple of minutes and you get a score so we can see how severe the depression is that day. But traditionally, to diagnose it, it's more just looking at what symptoms you're experiencing. So they might ask you, tell me about, some of the symptoms that you're struggling with or how you've been feeling and stuff like that. Other stuff, insomnia or hypersomnia. Insomnia is difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. Right, so you have a hard time falling asleep at night or staying asleep at night. Hypersomnia is when people sleep all the time. Like you cannot get out of bed, you're sleeping too much. All you want to do is sleep, right? And that is relatively common with depression, that people might just sleep all the time or they're not sleeping hardly at all. So again, there's a couple of ways sometimes that this can present, right? Depending on the person and depending on their pattern and what's going on in their life. Other stuff, there's a fatigue and loss of energy. You're wiped out despite maybe not doing all that much. Right? You're fatigued and tired. You don't have a lot of energy or motivation to do things. There's a lot of feelings of worthlessness or guilt. Right, I'm worthless. I'll never accomplish anything. Feeling bad about yourself, low self-esteem, maybe feeling guilty. Right? I'm not able to do the things I want to do. I feel bad about it. I'm not giving my kids enough attention. I feel bad about that. Like feeling guilty or worthless is really, really common. Reduced ability to think or concentrate. Oftentimes depression is described as like a mental fog. Makes it very difficult to think clearly. And so if you're struggling with depression, you might have a hard time on exams. Right? If you are in that mental fog, it's hard to remember stuff. People become very indecisive as well. They have a hard time making even the simplest of decisions because they just can't think clearly. Their brain isn't firing on all cylinders, right? And so they're having a hard time functioning and thinking clearly. There's often thoughts of death or suicide. Very common for people to consider hurting themselves in some way, or maybe consider ending their life. And we will have somebody coming in pretty soon. They just confirmed today they're going to come in person, and we're going to do a suicide prevention training, which is really neat. You get a little certificate and everything for having done it. You can put it on our resume and stuff like that. So I think they said, 1 second, I think it's next week that they're coming. They're coming on. Yep, so it'll be on Monday, I believe, either Monday or Wednesday of next week. They're going to come in and talk a little bit about suicide prevention. Instead of me lecturing on chapter 7, they're going to cover it, but it's very common to see suicidality as a result of all that worthlessness and hopelessness that can come with depression. And then finally, there's something that can sometimes happen called psychomotor agitation. Psychomotor agitation. And you see this a lot with mania and things like ADHD, where people have like movement that is mindless and sometimes almost like out of their control or awareness. Really common with ADHD, you see people like tapping a lot or like fidgeting a lot, like stuff like that is really common. With depression, it's oftentimes a slower, more like purposeless, almost mindless movement. So it might be like taking something on and off over and over again. Like maybe it's taking a ring on and off over and over again. You sometimes see people like pace back and forth, like really slowly. Pulling on their hair is another really common one. It's some kind of like mindless gesture that you tend to do. Tends to be more like hyper and like very quick with things like mania and ADHD, and a little slower and more like mindless with this. Not super common, but it can sometimes manifest with this. So I will put it up here and mention it. There's also a disorder called persistent depressive disorder or dysthymic disorder. Dysthymia is Greek for melancholy. Right, so this is somebody who has all of these symptoms, but on a less saline level, and it lasts for at least 2 years. So these, we're talking 2 weeks, impacting your life pretty drastically. Persistent depressive disorder is often missed for like just someone's personality, right? It's maybe someone who has constant like low mood, low energy. It lasts for at least 2 years, but on a much less intense level. So it's like a low grade, long-term lasting depression. It used to be called dysthymic disorder. Now it's called PDD, or persistent depressive disorder. So I have an example of somebody who I think exemplifies depression. It's a very unpopular example. I have been booed for this. We have time to watch it like 4 times if we wanted to. I'm just kidding. We won't watch it 4 times. But my example is Bella from New Moon. Just giving you a moment to process that if you needed to. What I love about that clip, right? And Bella has a lot of depression, right? She shows a lot of suicidality. You see her not hanging out with her friends, not eating, right? She has sleep disturbance. Poor Charlie. If anything, I feel bad for him, right? Having to every night deal with her screaming, right? But you see a lot of this stuff in her, right? She's not eating, not being social. She's not enjoying the things that used to bring her like happiness. In the movie or the book, she has a lot of suicidality, right? And like thoughts of that. There's a lot of those symptoms in her. And interesting, somebody mentioned this in one of my classes last year, and I never thought about it this way. But you could almost categorize her emails to Alice that aren't actually going through as like a form of psychomotor agitation. She's like typing these emails like mindlessly, but they're not ever being sent. And so you could almost, I think that kind of fits here a little bit. It's like a mindless kind of thing that she's doing repeatedly, and you do see that sometimes with depression. So as painful as it might be to watch, but I think she's a great example. Yeah.
So it's not like addiction.
Yeah, it's more like a mindless, purposeless thing. So oftentimes it's somebody like wringing their hands or like pulling on the collar of their shirt, maybe. I think it makes much more sense when you think about like hyperactivity, like people like often tap, right? Like I had a student last year, he would sit there and go like this, right? And everyone around him would be like twitching, right? Just the whole time, I'd be like, Jack, please. Just sat there the whole time, right? Like, we could all hear it. Like, he didn't even realize he was doing it. He would just click it over and over and over again. I was like, put the pen down, man, please, right? Like, that's all you could hear. So I think it makes more sense when you think about it that way. But with depression, it's more usually, it's usually like a slower, mindless gesture.
What about like vision? Is that fall into that category? Is that like a different?
Yeah, it's totally, I think would say a little different. Like with PTSD, we talked about hypervigilance. That's when you're like you're on edge, like everything makes you jumpy. Not so much. No, usually people who are depressed are like slower, like their system is depressed as well. And so you tend to be like mellower and slower in the way that you respond to things, rather than having that like on edge kind of hyperactive, vigilant quality. Where you might see that a little more almost with mania, where people are super reactive to things around them. Any other thoughts or comments or anything? I imagine a lot of you probably know someone who has depression. It's a difficult disorder. It's more than just being sad, right? Like sadness would fall still kind of in that normal realm of that like spectrum that I put up here. I once heard a speaker describe depression as the anguish of grief mixed with the sluggishness of jet lag. And I think that's a good way of thinking about it. It's a very impacting, difficult state. And people sometimes have a hard time getting themselves out of it. It can be very like circular in nature. Look, again, lots of explanations for depression. We'll get through this slide and then we'll be out of time. It is a little bit genetic. 27% more likely if you have a genetic parent who has depression, or a biological parent that has depression, you are a little bit more vulnerable. It doesn't mean you're doomed to get depression, but if you have a biological parent who has depression, you're a little more vulnerable than the average person. It does tend to run in families. But what we notice the most of everything up here is there's a lot of biochemical factors that play a role in depression. neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, serotonin, and also dopamine. Fascinating though, there was an article that came out, I want to say it was like 2 or 3 months ago. It was this massive meta-analysis, which means they took a ton of studies and examined them and then wrote about them. So rather than doing their own study, they analyzed a bunch of studies that were already done. And it was talking about the fact that maybe these neurotransmitters aren't such big culprits in depression like we thought. It was kind of attacking antidepressants and how they might not actually change anything, right? And it's just one study. You can always find a study to support one thing or the other. But it is interesting. There's some kind of growing research that maybe it's not as chemical as we thought, but we don't have anything to counter that quite yet. So we'll see where that goes in the future. But norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine are huge culprits as it stands right now with depression. And people have really low activity of these two different substances, and it causes people to be depressed. And there's lots of medications we can give people to help counter that, which we'll talk about on the next slide, probably next week. But we've also discovered very recently, within the last 10 years, that there is a brain circuit related to depression, a cluster of structures in the brain that work together to create like a perfect storm and cause people to be depressed. It's like they trigger each other and work on each other in the perfect, maybe bad way, if you will, like a perfect storm of like problem to create depression. And we can use this knowledge to help with brain stimulation methods, which we'll talk about next week as well. But there is a brain circuit for depression, and it's made up of a couple of different structures. So a couple of different parts of the brain. So one of them is the amygdala. The amygdala is the part of the brain that's in charge of emotional reactions to things. So it's thought that a person who has like a brain circuit for depression, that their amygdala is really elevated. So they're having more intense emotional reactions to things than would be typically expected. The hippocampus is also part of it. Otherwise, she always like responds to hippocampus. No, just I don't know. That's strange. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that's in charge of memory, right? It's kind of like the memory region, the index region for memory. And so it's thought that people have something going on with that as well. Think of that mental fog and inability to concentrate. The prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex in the front of the brain in charge of a lot of decision making, motivation, and drive and things along those lines. It's thought to be really underactive. And then finally, there's this tiny little area called Brodmann area 25, which I have up here. Brodmann area 25, tiny, tiny little region deep within the brain. And it has a lot of serotonin receptors in it. And so it's thought that this region of the brain, which is kind of like a governing region involving a bunch of different things, it triggers a bunch of different structures to go into action. It's thought that it has a lot of like deficiency in serotonin production. Serotonin being one of the big culprits biochemically for depression. And so we can use this knowledge, and there's a couple of like brain stimulation methods. One of the newer ones specifically targets Brodmann area 25 to increase serotonin production. So kind of a newer discovery in a sense. Like it explains why things like ECT and transcranial magnetic stimulation work and help with depression. But the biological ones are huge culprits. Right? There's a lot of biological culprits when it comes to depression, whether it's genetics or chemistry or these brain circuits. Any or all of them together, right, can contribute to somebody being depressed. And so because the biochemical factors are so common, we have a lot of biological treatments. And so I'll stop here. And then when I see you next, we'll talk about antidepressants, the different types. We'll talk about side effects and then brain stimulation methods. So quick reminders really quickly. Again, we won't see you Wednesday, right? I'll miss you. Again, I'll eat a lot of churro for all of you. I'll be nice and fat on churros when I see you next week. So no in-person class on Wednesday. If you can, please watch those 2 videos sometime this week, so that you can have that information to help you with the next part of the paper. And then on Monday, we will likely have our guest speaker who will be here, to talk about chapter 7, and then we'll go back to this, afterwards. So lots of kind of, exciting things to think about. So, have a wonderful rest of the week. I'll see you next week on Monday.
You ever heard of box breathing?
Of what?
Box breathing?
No, what's that?